Hey there, creatives. Thanks so much for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. I'm your host, Raina Lombardi, and I am really excited to bring this next series to the show. It's going to be a special series dedicated to speaking with different people, different therapists involved in the Expressive Therapies Summit. If you've never heard of the Expressive Therapies Summit, it is an intermodal, international conference that really is dedicated to experiential learning and brings together all of the different disciplines in the world of therapy. There are social workers, there's art therapists, dance therapists, music therapists, play therapists, any kind of therapist really imaginable, and everybody's sharing their experiential knowledge and hands-on learning activities. And it's a really wonderful event, and usually it's 4 days in the fall in New York City, and there is an LA component which happens in the spring. In this fall, I am interviewing probably, I would say, 8 to 10 people that are either directly involved in the summit or are going to be presenting on their topic of expertise. And we'll be learning about their clinical practices and what they'll be teaching at the event. And so you'll get kind of a snapshot, and hopefully in each conversation that we have, the key takeaways will relate to the work of creating something out of nothing, which is kind of the object of bringing your practice to life, or creating that therapeutic tool, writing a book, whatever it is that as a therapist you're passionate about and want to bring to life. And that's really the focus of the Creative Psychotherapist podcast show. In the first episode, I am interviewing Barry Cohen, who is the summit leader. And Barry's also an art therapist and former art therapy educator. He also is the creator of the Diagnostic Drawing Series, which is an art therapy assessment tool. And in our conversation, we'll be talking about how the summit came to be. And you'll also hear a little bit about some of the roles that I've played over the years, because I've been involved in the summit since the beginning. And it's something that I'm really passionate about and love. And I think part of being involved in the summit really allowed me to move in the direction that I'm in currently. I don't know if I would be here at this point without having participated in the summit and developing it and bringing it to life, sharing it with other people. I was very involved as the social media marketing person for the event for many, many years, until Laura Bader took over that a couple of years ago for me, because I just got too busy with my practice. But I'm hoping that you're going to really enjoy the conversations that we have. And so this is going to be the voices from the Expressive Therapies Summit special series. Let us know what you think.
The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Raina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative, focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Raina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. I am delighted to have my next guest on the show. She is a wealth of knowledge in the field of creative arts therapies and literally has been practicing for basically as long as I've been alive. And she's still practicing, which is wonderful. And I think that's just a testament to the work that we do and how it's so challenging and creative, and it's always evolving, that we never get bored, and it's like a continuous renewal. Anyway, please welcome Rebecca Walters. She is an LMHC, a licensed creative arts therapist, and a TEP, which is a trainer, educator, and practitioner by the American Board of Examiners in Psychodrama. She is the co-founder and director of the Hudson Valley Psychodrama Institute, where she developed that in 1989, and it provides professional training in action-based methods. She was the director of Child and Adolescent Psychodrama Services at Four Winds Psychiatric Hospital, a private institution in Westchester, New York, where she ran psychodrama groups on in- and outpatient child, adolescent, and adult units for over 25 years. Rebecca is the fellow of the American Society of Group Psychotherapy and Psychodrama and was the recipient of their 2018 JL Moreno Award for Lifetime Achievement in the field. Rebecca trains internationally on the use of psychodrama and sociodrama with children and adolescents, and on dialectical behavioral therapy in action. Welcome, Rebecca. Thanks so much for being here.
You're very welcome.
So you have been involved in the Expressive Therapies Summit, teaching each year for a very long time. And I know that you're going to be teaching again this year. And part of our conversation today is for the series Voices from the Expressive Therapies Summit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be teaching about this year? And obviously it might be a little bit different than how we would traditionally do it because it's going to be online, but I'd love to hear about what you're going to be teaching.
I'm going to be teaching a workshop on psychodrama and individual therapy. And I'm going to be doing it with Deb Shaddy, who is a faculty member at Hudson Valley Psychodrama Institute. It's going to be giving therapists of all sorts some basic psychodrama techniques, such as how and when to use role reversal, a technique called doubling, and perhaps we'll even have time to do a little concretization. Our style of teaching is very interactive, and we plan to use those breakout rooms so people can go off and practice with each other.
How exciting. So even though it's going to be online, it's still going to be experiential. It's still going to be immersive in that way. That's wonderful. So Rebecca, would you mind sharing how you got involved in the creative arts therapies? I would imagine in 77, it wasn't popular.
So I went to school at SUNY New Paltz, which is a half an hour away from Beacon, New York, which is where the JL Moreno and his wife, Zerka, who were the founders of psychodrama, had their institute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was an early childhood education major and psychology major. And I was very, very interested in using creative dramatics for education. There was a wonderful teacher named Joanna Krause, and I took every course I could take with her. We did a course in creativity, course in teaching history through drama, courses in just creative dramatics for children. And I could use these all to my education major requirements. So I was having a heyday. It was wonderful. We went up to Kingston, New York, and did the burning at Kingston with the children in a camp. The history of Kingston was the original capital of New York. And I had the 5-year-olds, and we were the fire. The 5-year-olds were the fire, and the 12-year-olds were the counselors sitting around talking about what we should do about this problem we're having with the British. It was quite wonderful. People said, oh, you should go check out psychodrama. And I went, oh no, that's too scary. And it's not for children anyway, is it? So I wasn't interested. Now, I graduated and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I asked my parents if they would support me in taking some summer classes, graduate course called Movement Education. And let me roll back.
Okay.
In that creative drama for children's class, one of the children, the daughter of one of the psychology professors was in that class. She was about 12 years old. She was one of the children. And she'd come in every day. This is probably 76, 75 maybe. She'd come in every day with her little dress, because in those days, girls wore dresses to school, and her little patent leather shoes. And she was really very prissy. And she only wanted to play roles in which she would be the princess or the queen or the mother, the teacher. And by the end of the 12 weeks of the course was a 14-week course, but the children were only there for 10 to 12 weeks. She became the head astronaut on a mission to go to Mars and explore Mars. And a light bulb went off in my head. I said, boy, this has really changed things for her. Playing like this, doing these creative dramatics all during the semester. During that summer, I took a course called Movement Education, and a couple of things happened for me in that class. One was that I saw the difference between when I walked around the room, hunched over, tight in my body, with my shoulders pulled together, and how different I felt when I walked the same circle, but my shoulders were back, my head was up, and I was looking high. And I consulted with the teachers of the class, and they said, do you know anything about dance therapy? And I said, well, I happen to have a cousin who's a dance therapist. I don't know what she does, but I'll talk to her. So I called my cousin Wendy up. She lived in Cambridge. And she said, there's a great program here at Leslie that integrates all this stuff together. So I applied to be in the dance therapy program with a woman named Norma Canner, who your dance therapy people will all know.
Yes, absolutely. Right? Yeah.
Well, I was turned down. So I called Leslie University and asked to speak to the dean, Sean McNiff, who said to me, there's no room and I don't like being pressured. And I said, okay, I was 24. I said, okay, I'm sorry, Dr. McNiff, and I hung up. And the whole train ride home, I was working in Manhattan, and the whole train ride home from my job in Manhattan to my parents' house, I was, what am I going to do with my life? And I get home, my brother says, Leslie University called, you got in, call them back. Well, what happened was he took a look at my transcript and realized that I'd be perfect for the psychodrama group core.
Okay.
And he put me in psychodrama, saying, if there's a space in January for dance therapy, you can transfer if. So I went up to Leslie, determined, and I met Norma, because I did have dance therapy. I don't know what it's like today, but in those days, I took dance therapy, art therapy, 2 courses in psychodrama, and principles and practices of psychotherapy. That was each semester, and other stuff in between. And so I did get to work with Norma. But I spent the first 6 weeks arguing with my professor, Peter Rowan, that psychodrama was too intense for children and we shouldn't be doing it with them. We should be doing creative dramatics. And by 6 weeks, I realized that creative dramatics is psychodrama for children. So I became a convert, and I've been proselytizing ever since. Right? So that's how I got involved with psychodrama. I worked my first 2 years. My first year at Leslie, you had to do a practicum, and it was in a school for emotionally disturbed, learning disabled kids. In those days, EDLD.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started working at a psychiatric hospital in New Jersey. I did my internship with a woman named Jackie Soroka. Now, Jackie's married to Bob Soroka, and they had the Institute for Sociotherapy. Now, it's now called the Sociometry Institute. It was the big psychodrama training institute in New York City. And so that's where I finished up most of my training. And after about 4 years down at Fair Oaks Hospital in Summit, I had a baby in 1981. And for the next 4 years, I was an at-home mom. And then we had moved up to New Paltz. I started working at Four Winds. A couple days ago. They were looking for a psychodramatist who knew how to work with teenagers, which was my specialty. And it was a very similar hospital. It was a long-term psychiatric, unlocked psychiatric hospital. And I ran groups for children. There were no children there at that point. I ran some adolescent groups, and I ran groups for adults.
Mm-hmm.
And 25 years later, when I retired from Four Winds, I was running groups for children. By that point, they had children and adolescents.
Wow.
Hey, are you ready to gain clarity for your vision and draft actionable steps to achieve the outcomes you desire for your practice? We at the Creative Clinicians Corner are now offering professional consultation services that help creative therapists organize the ideas spinning in their minds into a strategic map to launch and scale their private practices, so you can breathe with ease and confidence and take the action you need to achieve the practice of your dreams. Nothing is insurmountable, and knowing your path to success will only inspire you to push through all the roadblocks, and you don't have to do it alone. Visit us at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com and see the really affordable packages we have for you right now.
So, obviously, 25 years in one hospital is a really long time. How did things grow and change and develop over the course of your career there, and then with psychodrama in general?
Well, so when I started, the man who owned Four Winds, Sam Klagsbrun, had done his medical residency at Yale and had trained in psychodrama with a man named Gene Eliasov, who had trained at Beacon. In fact, Gene was one of my trainers at one point. Wonderful man. And he was committed to having psychodrama be at Four Winds. Now, where I'd worked before, psychodrama was part of what they call creative, I guess we call the Creative Arts Therapy Department. It was very much seen as an activity.
Mm-hmm.
And at Four Winds, it was not. It was part of the clinical services. Mm-hmm. And in the first old days when we were there, first of all, people stayed for 8 months, a year and a half. Everybody came to the psychodrama groups, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the social workers, the janitors, everybody came from the unit. They all came.
Wow.
And because the patients were there for so long, we could let them take weeks and weeks and weeks to warm up. Mm-hmm. As long as they were not disrupted, they did not have to do their own work, but as they got better, they got more and more involved. And we did a lot of really deep work. So there's a little piece that I want you to understand, because it really impacts the way we do psychodrama, and I think the way we do creative arts therapy as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
In 1977, I'm taking courses in principles and practices of psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And among the books we're reading are books like The Radical Therapist and The Politics of Therapy, which I think people should still be reading.
Mm-hmm.
But in the textbooks, they're saying things like sexual abuse happens rarely, incest happens rarely, and there's like a paragraph given over to this, and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
In 1981, at Four Winds, things started to change. We had a therapist there who had trained at Smith.
Okay.
So Smith College has one of the finest social work programs, clinical social work programs in the United States. She said, you guys need to be asking the question, has anyone touched you in a way that made you uncomfortable? And Raina, all hell broke loose. Because all of a sudden, without any training, I'm doing psychodramas about sexual abuse. Now, I had enough common sense and enough good theoretical sense that I didn't put kids, I was working with teenagers, I didn't put them back in the scenes. I let them stay outside of it.
Sure.
And go in as the superhero, or go in as the parent who should have gone in. I mean, we've learned a lot. I don't even do that much anymore when I'm dealing with sexual abuse, usually. But we knew nothing about this. But we were dealing with families for, months and months and months. And so not only did the teenager get better, but the whole family got better. Because they'd come once a week to what's called a multiple family group. And they'd come back after the kid left. They'd all come back for 6-7 weeks, once a week, to be part of this ongoing discharge plan. I mean, discharge took longer then than the whole treatment does today.
Yeah, it is different in terms of the amount of time that we're allotted to help people
Right.
reintegrate their experience. Mm-hmm.
Right. So as time went on, the stays got shorter and shorter. And the trauma work that was being done at the hospital in the old days, all kinds of trauma work. I had a colleague who was a veteran, psychodramatist, who was doing trauma for veterans. The psychodrama work got shorter and less intense because the stays were very short. And because you couldn't build a group that felt safe enough with each other to do the kind of work one can do in psychodrama.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to reenact your family's life story when you don't trust the other teenagers in the room.
Of course not.
So I moved more and more towards doing something called sociodrama.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than be the story of Joe and his mother and his father who are getting divorced, it becomes, here's a kid, let's make a name up for him, and his parents are divorcing. Mm-hmm. And it becomes distant. It's what the drama therapist is called, the aesthetic distance. Sociodrama is the bridge between psychodrama and drama therapy. It overlaps. Okay. We both use it. So as the stays got shorter, I did more and more sociodrama and less psychodrama. Okay. And then the hospital decided to go to dialectical behavioral therapy. Mm-hmm. And they let go of all their psychodramatists, except for me. And they said, you can teach anything, right, Rebecca, in action? I said, yeah, if I know the content, I can come up with a way to do it in action. Because we all know that if you're going to teach, doing it in action, people remember it, right?
Yeah.
So here's what happened. I would go in and I would walk. The first few weeks, I just watched the other therapists had gone through the full 10-day training. And they're going to teach something like wise mind, emotional mind, and rational mind. And they're using whiteboards. And they're using handouts. Mm-hmm. To kids who hate school, they're giving them worksheets. So we go way back to my original training in education back in the 70s. And I said, no, watch this. And I pulled out 3 chairs. And they're bouncing around the chairs. This is my emotional mind. This is my rational mind. This is my wise mind. We do the whole thing in action. So DBT consists of a whole lot of skills. Mm-hmm. Skill training. I mean, it consists of many parts. One of them is individual therapy, but the group that they have are not group therapy. They're really psychoeducation.
Right.
And they want to use role plays. Well, who better than a psychodramatist to do role plays?
Absolutely.
Because the thing with role plays is you have to warm the group up. And I'm really good at warming the group up. Once you get the group warmed, they want to practice. They want to try things out. So by the time I left there, I was running 6 groups in 2 days. And it was all skill groups except for, I had 4 skill groups for the teenagers, and we're doing 2 groups in the children's units. One for the younger children and one for the slightly older children. Mm-hmm. But I want to say something about the role play.
Okay.
And the role training is what we call it in psychodrama. You know, how do you walk? What do you do if you're starting to get agitated to walk away from people who are yelling at you so you calm yourself down? Mm-hmm. It's role training. I also taught certain skills, how to de-escalate your own self, your own body. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so much role training; it was giving them a opportunity to practice.
Sure.
But we did it within a role play, so that they could feel the agitation start and then practice calming themselves down. Part of why I left Four Winds is that I had started going to MD Anderson, which is a major cancer center. It's the University of Texas Medical Center in Houston, to do communication skill workshops for doctors and nurses.
Wow.
And sociodrama to teach things like, it was called Challenging Conversations in Healthcare. And it was everything from giving bad news to managing angry parents, angry families and patients, to dealing with mentoring supervision issues. And we taught skills. We taught empathy. We taught, what do you say when the person says this? We taught, how do you de-escalate? Someone who's really, really angry, what do you say? And we use sociodrama to practice.
That's amazing.
And once again, it's all about the warm-up, because these doctors would come in with their white coats, with their notepads. And I'd say, take the white coats out and put down your notepads, what, and stand up. And I'd move them into all kinds of sociometric warm-ups, getting them to connect with each other. You know, so to understand, nobody likes dealing with angry parents and family members and patients. They just don't. No one wants to walk in the park. So once you realize that we're all in the same boat, let's talk about the most difficult situations, and let's put them into action with made-up names, made-up doctors, made-up nurses, made-up patients. And they'd walk out, and their evaluations would say things like, I hate role play. This was really fun. Or I learned more in these 3 hours than I've learned in 8 years of taking courses in communication. Because usually what happens with the nurses is they're lectured to, PowerPoints. Okay, so that was my career. And I left, as that became, I was flying down there 6 to 8 times a year for a week at a time. I couldn't keep working at Four Winds.
Oh my gosh,
So,
no.
You know, at the same time, in 1989, Judy Swallow and myself started Hudson Valley Psychodrama Institute. Mm-hmm. And we started it because we didn't feel that the training that was going on was mostly personal growth work. People would come and they'd watch these brilliant psychodramatists do fabulous psychodramas. And they might talk about it a little bit afterwards. And the next week you'd go back and they'd do the same thing. And that's a perfectly valid way of teaching. It doesn't work for me.
But they weren't getting the chance to embody it and try it on themselves?
As protagonists, they were. They were getting to be a protagonist in their own drama and auxiliaries in their own drama, but they weren't getting to do much directing.
Okay.
So our style, our method of teaching is to chunk it down into teachable skills that people can walk out and use right away with their clients. Mm-hmm. I had to wait. I don't think I directed my first full drama for 4 years after I started training. I was too terrified to. I did little pieces, and at Leslie, we did break things down. You know, that's the way that they teach at the university. And I did practice, little directing, little vignettes, little scenarios. But in our institute, we, for example, we have a 5-day intensive, and we spend the first 3/4 of the first day teaching how do you group build. We don't just do it, we teach it. We explain it.
Right.
And then the group has come together. We do a psychodrama, a full psychodrama. The next morning we get together, we process the drama and answer questions. And then we teach doubling, which they saw in the drama the night before. And they get to all go off and practice with each other. Because to us, that's good training.
Yeah.
And that's how we do the whole 5 days. We do a big psychodrama, or we teach a piece. People get warmed up. We do a whole psychodrama. We process and answer questions about the drama. And students get a chance to go off and practice little pieces with each other. Just like in the psychodrama individual therapy, they're not going to watch Deb and me do a session
right
for the whole time. They'll see us do a little piece, and they're going to go off and practice it with each other. So they can walk out with something they can use. And if they're interested in more psychodrama, they can come get further training, but at least they'll have something.
No, I love that. And that's one of the things that I love most about the summit as a training platform, event, conference, whatever you want to call it, is that that's the key component. You get the theory, you get the knowledge, you get the research, you get the didactic information, and then you get to try it on and integrate it. Yeah.
Yes. That's good teaching.
Yeah. So what, you've had the Hudson Valley Psychodrama Institute since 1989. When you first opened, was it the same then as it is now, or has it been its own evolution as well?
Well, it's had its own evolution. I mean, we started the year before we opened the Institute, with the other psychodramists at Four Winds, we ran a 2-hour training group every morning, Thursday mornings, for about 10 weeks over one summer. Most of the people who came were people from Four Winds. And the following year, Judy and I started a training group, and it was one evening a week. And it ran for, 10 weeks in the spring and 10 weeks in the fall. And then we started, people wanted to learn more and work more and go deeper with their own psychodrama training. By its nature, people do their own personal work.
Yeah.
Right. So they wanted to go deeper. So we started a core training program that met Saturday and Sunday, I guess 9 times during the course of the year.
Okay.
What happened? Meanwhile, we're doing these 5-day intensives twice a year, 3 times a year, and we're starting to get students from all over the world and all over the country.
Wow.
We're an international training institute. We've had students come from Hong Kong and Korea and China and Guatemala and Costa Rica and all over Europe and Australia. So we've, and Africa. We have somebody came from Saudi Arabia and Egypt, right? And of course, Italy and France and England and Germany and Switzerland and all over Europe. So we had more students than we knew what to do with. So what we did was we turned the core program into Core 1, and it meets Friday, Saturday, and Sunday 6 times a year, the academic year. And then we have the other core that meets 3 times a year for 6 days. So both meet 18 days, but it's a different schedule. That's the core. So the Core 1 gets the local people. Core 2 gets the people who fly in. So needless to say, Core 2, which was supposed to start in March, started in the middle of March. We ran it for 4 days and we closed it. Everybody flew home and we have not met since. We've done some stuff online, but we're going to actually be closing that program down until we can meet again, because obviously, we might do some stuff online. We might do like a 3-day online here and a 3-day online. But obviously the 6-day, we're not going to do 6 days online.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Right? The other core probably will start up online later in the fall or possibly early next year. And we started doing a lot of workshops that are integrating psychodrama with specific other modalities. So for example, I do DBT in action as a 3-day training. And it's full of DBT
awesome
therapists. And I go through the modules and I say, I'm going to practice, and then you're going to go out and try it with each other. And then come back and bring, what have you tried? So it becomes a workshop in which people are sharing things they've done. People love it.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah, I would imagine. Well, one, to become DBT certified, that's a really intensive program, and they're very hard to find people that are legitimately fully certified. And so, yeah, I imagine it is kind of lonely when there's not a lot of other people doing that.
Yes, exactly. And what happens is, if the way DBT is supposed to work is you're supposed to have a team. And a lot of people are out there doing DBT light, I call it. It's DBT informed. And they start doing their own skill groups. Well, skill groups are just psychoeducation. But there's nobody to bounce ideas off of. And a lot of this becomes very dry. For a lot of boring. We do that. We do couples action, couples therapy in action. All kinds of wonderful things you can do with couples. We do children, psychodrama with children. Sociodrama with children, sociodrama work, 3-day sociodrama workshop on how to use sociodrama in both clinical settings and in education. Wow. So we have the in action series, you know, and we have a whole recovery a program for substance abuse counselors, recovery in action, motivational interviewing in action. How do you take a group of substance abusers and get them out of their chairs to explore motivation?
Oh,
motivational interviewing, right?
Awesome.
Right? And the same thing with stages of change, which most substance abuse programs are using, but people are sitting in their chairs talking about it. And Jenny Salambini, who does those workshops, gets people out of their chairs and teaches the participants how to do that with their groups, how to get people out of their chairs and into action.
I want to take that.
I do one called I Don't Want to, You Can't Make Me, action interventions with adolescents and substance abusers and other reluctant clients.
So good.
It's not resistance, working with resistance. So we have a whole series that are very geared to specific training purposes for mental health professionals and educators. And then we have a whole series that are more personal growth oriented, on working with the body, on dream work, on working ancestral stories and stuff like that. That's less teaching and more just doing.
Wow.
So we've run the whole gamut. There's myself and Judy Swallow, there's Jenny Salambini and Deb Shaddy, who are our senior faculty. And we have guest faculty who come and present in their areas of expertise. We have Dan Tomasulo, who is very big in the positive psychology world, does trainings for us. And I'm hoping he'll do one online for us this year. We've had very well-known psychodramatist John Nolte. Zerka Moreno came and did some guest faculty for us years ago. That's sort of...
It's grown. It's really grown and evolved. Did you imagine that when you and Judy decided to do this in '89, that it would be this robust, diverse training ground for therapists and educators in all different, areas of expertise?
No. I thought we'd end up having, a group that met 2 days a month. And, we're now, well, not right now because of the things of COVID, but up until March, we were probably the most active training institute in the country, or one of the most, certainly the most in the East Coast. There are some in New York City, they all meet like over the course of the year, but I don't think anybody else has the sort of focus that we have.
Yeah.
We like this way. So we have, typically over a year, we train over 100 students a year in ongoing, and I didn't mention the directing intensives. So twice a year, I take 7 or 8 experienced psychodrama directors, and each of them directs a 2.5-hour psychodrama, and then we process it for an hour. And out of that comes the directing cohort. So I have one directing cohort who's been meeting for 4 years. So twice a year, they come and they know each other really well, and they trust each other, and they do their own deep work, but they also really work on their developing their directing skills and their clinical skills. So I'd say over the course of the year, we have about, I'm thinking 36, another 75, probably about 125 students a year come through our doors.
Wow.
Most of them in ongoing or 5-day or ongoing trainings.
I think it's incredible, to start from this little idea of, we're going to just meet a couple times a month, 2 groups, but now to have this rich, diverse program that's hosting people from around the world to do this work. It's incredibly inspiring.
Part of why the people from around the world come is because we have, in 1987, when JL Moreno left Beacon, they moved that stage, the original psychodrama stage, and moved it to Highland, to a community center in Highland, a nonprofit community center. That's where we do our training. So we get to train on the original Moreno stage.
Wow, that's really cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah, talk about like your work coming full circle from your original, when you first started, and getting involved. That's so cool.
And Judy Swallow actually did a lot of her training on that stage back in the 70s.
And so how would you say the work has changed? Obviously, people are still practicing. They're practicing via telehealth. We're moving towards training via telehealth. Are there any creative strategies to helping people engage in meaningful dramatics that have to be implemented through this particular telehealth video conferencing modality, which, obviously when I think of psychodrama, I think the body is moving in space and there's, a lot of action happening. And so this is a little bit different. How are you approaching that?
Well, it's interesting you asked me that because the ASGPP is putting on a work conference over Columbus Day weekend, a teleconference. And I'm on a panel with 5 other psychodramatists. We were talking about that just this morning. In psychodrama, we have this concept that there's 3 parts to any psychodrama.
Mm-hmm.
The first part is the warm-up.
Mm-hmm.
Second part is the action, and the third part is the sharing. And what we're all recognizing is that it's all about the warm-up. Once you get people warmed up, the fact that you're doing it on a screen doesn't really matter anymore. It's just, it takes a lot more effort to warm people up, to help people feel connected.
Yeah.
Because they're not really looking at let's say they're looking at 12 people on the screen. When you're in a room, they're looking at one person at a time during the warm-ups, interactive warm-ups. Here, we're looking at everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not touching.
Right.
Now, in a psych hospital, there's not a lot of touching. So I'm used to doing warm-ups that don't involve touch.
Mm-hmm.
But we might do stand over here if you're feeling like you're ready to go home. Listen, over here. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay, over here is I'm ready to go home, and over here is I'm not ready to go home. Where are you on that line? I mean, I use that so often as a warm-up with my teenagers, because it was, okay, what do you need in order to be over there? Well, I need to blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's practice, right? So how do you do that online? So we've learned to, use our hands. We've learned to use our bodies. So if we do polarities, for example, I like ice cream and I like cake. Over here, I like ice cream. Over here, I like cake. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. We do a lot with objects, like find something that represents your wise mind. So here's what represents my wise mind. Now, if I were doing this in a group, I might have people find an object. Okay.
Yeah.
But then I have them physically move reverse roles of the object and present them. So here's how you would do it if you were doing it online. It's this cup, right? And there's only a little bit of water in it. And I am Rebecca's wise mind. And she drinks from me on a regular basis. And she needs to remember that no matter how much she drinks, there's always a tap that will give her more. Now you can do that online. You have everybody get up and walk around their own spaces and find something. What you can't do online is, there's a wonderful warm-up where people put their hands against each other and push and pull, right? You can't do that online. Right. So what do? You say, everybody go stand up and go find a wall in your room and push on it and make a sound. Come back. What is it in your life you want to push away? I mean, I'm making that up, but you get the idea. So, there's lots you can do. On the other hand, there's a lot that's missing. And I think it behooves us to recognize, everyone's so excited we're doing everything online. Let's be realistic. It's not the same as meeting in person. We're not meeting. We're not picking up each other's energy. And we're not touching.
That's a huge part, right, of being in the room with other people is the energy. We talk about, the facial expressions and the subtle, body exchanges, which we can see some of that. We can't see everybody's whole body most of the time, but there's the physical felt sense of the energy in the room. Right, that it doesn't necessarily translate all the time.
Moreno talked about tele. Tele was his word for sensing the actuality of another person across space. So it's always mutual. So I see you as who you really are, and as who you know yourself to be. And you see me as who I really am and who I really know myself to be. And it's mutual, it's positive and it's mutual and it's positive. And that he calls tele. And have you ever met someone and clicked with them like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's tele. Right. Now, then we read the book Blink. Did you read the book Blink? By Malcolm Gladwell. It's about intuition. How do we know things without knowing? And our unconscious knows things. All right. And you have to differentiate tele from transference, right? Which is I'm seeing you. It's not really who you really are. It's who I'm imagining you to be. Or projection, right?
Yes.
And so tele is not that. Tele is someone's called it two-way empathy. It's two-way. It's you knowing me and me knowing you, and it's accurate. All right. Some people believe in negative tele. I don't. I think negative tele is almost always transference and projection. But positive tele, I mean, I've met someone and it was like that. I love them. They love me without almost any interaction. And it was real. We checked it out as time went on. So we have no way of really measuring that. So he meant, what I say is that, look, before Ben Franklin's experiment with electricity,
Mm-hmm.
Electricity existed, right?
Yeah.
We just had no way of acknowledging it or measuring it or uncovering it. Well, now we know about mirror neurons.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know about PET scans and your head lighting up at the same place that my head lights up. There's all kinds of stuff. We're only now beginning to have the ability to measure.
Right.
Right. So we talk about energy and it sounds very new agey. I don't think it's new agey. I think there's just stuff that people give off in space with each other that we don't know how to identify or measure yet.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when I walk into a room of people and I'm sensing something, and it may be because of all the people in their body language.
Mm-hmm.
It may be because people are sitting closer to each other this week than they were last week or further apart. Who knows what it is?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could probably sit down and spend an hour figuring out exactly what I experienced, but I can walk into a room and say, this group is ready, this group is not ready, this group there's a lot of anxiety in this group, people are really relaxed in this group, there's a lot of giggling, I'm working with teenagers, there's a lot of high energy, well, high energy is obvious, but how do you do that on a computer screen?
I think it's much harder, right? We have to further develop our skills and abilities to be able to do the work that we were just like walking a room and just that sense of knowing from the experience of doing it so many times, right? You understand what's going on in your body. Your body's the instrument. And here now we have like some interference. And
yeah, because I'm not what's called an empath. I mean, there are people who pick up a lot, and I'm kind of relieved I don't, because it can be really overwhelming.
Sure.
But I do pick energy up when I'm walking into a room, and I can't do that now.
Yeah.
I think, though, I want to kind of something you just said about how do we do what we used to do with this interference. I think we need to change what we used to do. I don't think we're going to be doing the same sort of thing. I don't think we can. I think we have to have different goals, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
I'm not sure what they are yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I have been in many Zoom rooms doing psychodrama, not facilitating, but being in the group. I don't think I've ever had the group of people feel that kind of visceral connection.
Right.
Like we're family, we're each other's tribe. We're the family we should have had.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had that on Zoom. I've had some really lovely interactions and some feeling of collegiality and
Sure.
feelings of, oh, I want to gather again, but not that, oh, you're my soul sister.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's also very different doing groups online with groups who already are a formed group, who have had the in-person experience with each
This
other.
is true. Yes.
A group that is newly forming.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. Yeah. It's definitely different. And this year, for sure, if we were to select a few words that, at least for me, if I were to select a few words to represent what's happening, is an exercise in flexibility, an exercise in patience, an exercise in re-education, and having to say, okay, this is hard for me, where I'm used to things being a little bit easier for me to facilitate. It's hard for me, which means I need to re-educate, to learn skills to use this medium in a way that is more effective than what I'm capable of doing as I am currently.
Yeah, well, part of why HVPI is not doing any workshops right now is that we're all busy training and how to do workshops online. Somebody once said to us, our brand, HVPI's brand, I don't talk this way, I don't think this way, but she said, you know, HVPI has a brand. I said, what's the brand? She said, you do very high level trainings. I'm blanking on the word she used. You're all very, very good teachers. People walk away really
Quality.
High quality. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry about the phone. I can't.
Oh, that's okay.
We want our online trainings to be as equally high quality as our in-person ones. So we're doing all kinds of trainings. The president of the ASGPP, Daniela Simmons, happens to have an institute called Teledrama. She's been doing this for at least 3 years because she's originally from Bulgaria. And so her trainings, she does a lot of trainings for people from Europe. So when this thing happened, she went into high gear and started offering all these trainings on how to do psychodrama online, how to do individual psychodrama online, how to do sociodrama online. She's wonderful, and she's very, very patient. She doesn't get thrown by those of us who go, oh my God, I can't get it turned. And she's, okay, take a deep breath. Go back. Do you see this on your screen? She's terrific. So I highly recommend her trainings. Okay. We also have a man from Russia whose first name is Pavel, who wrote a whole entire paper, thesis, basically, or I don't know, a document on using how to do psychodrama online that his students translated into English, that he's making available to everybody who wants it. So there's a lot in the psychodrama world for how to do this. There's also an organization called the International Association of Group Psychotherapy and Processes, which was the International Psychodrama organization that Moreno helped start. They're doing tremendous amounts of work online, both in terms of training and they do workshops on, they're doing sociodrama on trauma in Lebanon. Wow. They're in Europe. So they're doing stuff, and it's in English. Very often it's in English. They're doing all kinds of, 3-hour workshops online addressing both how do you do these things online and political issues online.
Very cool.
A lot of interesting stuff happening.
Yeah, for sure. We're obviously, nobody is on the premises right now, but once things do get back into reopening, where do you see the Training Institute, moving into the future?
Well, we have plans.
Good.
So first of all, we tried to do an intensive in the end of August, and we limited it to 10 people, and we had 10 people sign up for it. The problem was that New York State then quarantined, put all these rules, rightly so. New York State said if you were coming from these states, you had to quarantine yourself for 2 weeks. Right. So we ended up, we would have only had 3 people, because we were having people driving from Chicago and driving from Pittsburgh and driving from Maryland, all over. So I think as soon as we're able to start, as soon as there are fewer states that are quarantined, as soon as New York we will start hosting smaller. We used to have we'd have 18 people and 3 faculty. Now we're going to probably start with 9 or 10 with 1 faculty, and then increase it as we can. And we're not going to be getting students from overseas, obviously, in the beginning. So I think that we'll also start doing maybe some 1- and 2-day workshops, people locally who can drive here, take the train up from New York City and take a taxi over here. As soon as people feel comfortable doing that, we bought face shields. We're hoping that wearing the face shields, people will feel comfortable not using masks. Some of them will, some of them won't. Sure. I think with face shields alone, you can see people's faces. I think it'll be fun. We just won't have people going close to each other, and we'll adjust ourselves to that. We can do that. we are going to be starting a whole unit within HVPI for substance abuse counselors, which we're very excited. Jenny Salambini, who is one of my senior faculty, is a CASAC, and she has had 30 years of experience running rehabs, both inpatient and outpatient rehabs. And she's a trainer level psychodramatist. So she will be starting that online, and it will move to in-person. I think once again, we're looking at how do we get more local people, because as an international trainer, we have students who fly in, 3 times a year from New Mexico and California. Are they going to keep doing that? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we make it a little smaller for a while and do more local stuff. That's okay.
Gosh, well, I love that you're going to be doing the training for the substance abuse population. People that are working with that population, yeah. I think that the modality really lends itself well. Yeah.
I mean, pick something in your room to be your drug of choice.
Mm-hmm. Now
reverse roles. Yeah. Right? I mean, we do this in person. Pick something in your room to be your higher power. Mm-hmm. Reverse roles. What's your message to Rebecca? Right? Back and forth. Individual, or pick someone in the group to be your higher power.
Yeah.
And let them pick a color scarf and now have the conversation online. Just like we would do it. You're not going to be doing huge psychodramas, but you'll be doing inaction.
Yeah.
Stuff. And people will move their bodies. They'll move. I mean, I did one, I was with a student. I had her have 2 chairs, and I literally had her move from her chair to the chair of her client as she was doing supervision. Did I see all of it? No, it's enough. It's important for her to do the moving back and forth.
Right. So that's awesome. Well, I have the website for the Hudson Valley Psychodrama Institute, hvpi.net, and I'm going to include that in my show notes. If people wanted to learn more about you or get in touch with you, is that the best place to do that?
It is. My email address is hvpi@hvpi.net, and it's my only email address.
Okay.
And my phone number is 845-255-7502. That's the Institute's number. They can call.
Okay.
And I'm happy to talk about psychodrama, as you see.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to share in regards to therapists that might be considering attending your workshop at the summit and what they can expect?
You can expect to walk away with some skills that you can use, some techniques that you can use right away.
Awesome.
I'd like to say something else about the summit.
Yes, please do.
When I started my psychodrama training, I started in 1976. And I went to the psychodrama conference in New York. In those days, the conference was always held at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan, right near Grand Central Station. And there were over 1,500 people.
Wow.
And there were over 1,500 people because the American Society of Group Psychotherapy and Psychodrama, who started those conferences, was the only game in town. There was no art therapy association and dance therapy association. Drama therapy hadn't even started really yet. And so everybody came to that conference, and there were art therapists and dance therapists and psychodramatists, and anybody who wanted to offer a workshop was allowed to offer a workshop. Some pretty scary things happened, and I'm glad that they've kind of tightened it up now,
Sure.
But that was really basically the idea behind this summit, was to have all the creative arts therapies, and there it was in the 70s and 80s. And then as these organizations began to get professionalized and split off, you had the Art Therapy Association and the Drama Therapy Association, the dance, their own conferences.
Right.
And so one thing that's very special about the summit is it's bringing us all back together.
Yeah, no, that's so
It was
true.
Moreno's idea.
I, I think that there's something really special about getting to work with other people that understand a different aspect of creativity than what I practice. And I always walk away learning so much from the other practitioners there.
I have one thing I want to say before we end, and that was when you said the thing about we need to find new ways of doing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Moreno psychodrama is all based on the idea of it's about spontaneity theory. And spontaneity basically is about finding a new solution to an old problem, or an adequate solution to a new problem. And everything we do in psychodrama is to train us to be more spontaneous in the roles we take in life, in our relationships, and I think ultimately in this time of COVID.
Yeah, seems incredibly appropriate. A really great fit. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for being willing to talk to me today. And I think listeners are going to learn a lot, especially if they haven't had any experience with psychodrama before.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Voices from the Expressive Therapies Summit special series on the Creative Psychotherapist podcast. Today, my guest was Rebecca Walters, and Rebecca is a seasoned professional. She has been working in the field for several decades. She started in the 70s, which was around the time that I was born. And she's been doing this work this entire time. And now her practice really focuses more on the training of other therapists in the work. And of course, she had training with some of the founding people in the field of psychodrama, the Morenos, and she shared a little bit about that in our conversation. I loved how she talked about thinking about integrating the different theoretical approaches and different skill sets and interpreting them in action methods and engaging the clients in and therapists in training in embodied approaches to skill development. I think that was really, really cool. And I hadn't thought about the connection between psychodrama and substance abuse treatment. But after our conversation, I really started to think about what a beautiful pairing those two make, because the dramatic methods, you have to start to play that role. And it forces you to do something different. I just imagine that there's a lot of resistance that can be broken through in this method that might be a little bit harder in other methods. And she had also talked about some great training opportunities for folks that are looking to develop specific skill sets for providing action-based psychotherapy approaches via technology. And one of those was teledrama, and I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes. So for individuals that are looking for additional training on how to integrate this work successfully and implement it successfully using telehealth, because I mean, we're all kind of being forced to go in that direction for right now, I want you to be able to have those resources too, to get that additional specific kind of training. And the benefit of attending her session at the summit, as she said, you'll be able to take away specific skills that can immediately be implemented in your practice with clients. And of course, it's going to be taught over telehealth. And so you'll get to experience and practice those in the moment in the session, which of course in our conversation, as you heard, we learn much more by the act of doing than by the act of absorption and just listening. So if you're interested in learning more about psychodrama, I can't think of a better trainer, facilitator than Rebecca. And you can find more about her session at the summit by heading over to expressivetherapiessummit.com. And of course, you can look up all of the different presenters that are going to be teaching at the summit this fall. And as I've said before, what's great about this year is you can sign up for one session, you can sign up for 2 sessions, you can sign up for a full day, 2 days, whatever you want. So there's a lot of flexibility here, where in the past you had to commit to a full day, or there was like 2-day rate or a 3-day rate, but not per session. So that's really exciting. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did having it with her. I know I learned a lot about the field and how much the field itself has changed and evolved over the years. And it just speaks to this process of us being flexible, of us as therapists being ongoing, continuous learners in our process. And yeah, so I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.